A journalist calls at 4:30 for the 6 p.m. news with a story that has severe ramifications for the reputation of your business. What do you do? Peter Wilkinson, you have developed a 9-step guide on how to handle this situation.
Yeah, so 4:30 for the 6 p.m. news. So really, you've got to get back to them by 5:30. You've got an hour. So the first tip is airlines, mines, aged care centres, hospitals, other organisations that are used to crisis will know this, is to have a crisis plan so people can immediately slip into a mode of operation that will give us the best possible outcome in the hour that we've got. Tip 2 is to understand that deadline and do a fact check. Do what you can to find out the truth of the allegation that the journalist is going to make on the 6 p.m. news. The difficulty you've got in that hour is it's almost certain that you won't get a full picture. You'll get a half picture, so a bit like a half-made jigsaw puzzle. So it's instantly getting messy. The third thing you want to do is do a quick Google on the journalist. If the journalist is a seasoned journalist and rushes, knows exactly what he wants, has already formed an opinion, maybe ratings get a bit ahead of accuracy sometimes, or on the other hand, the journalist is fair, balanced, really wants to get it right, empathetic, understands there are two sides to the story, or there'll be shades of grey in between. So between those two, getting your fact check done and understanding the journalist and the publisher, understanding the tug and the push and pull between those two, really valuable as quickly as you possibly can.
Yes, it's absolutely critical, just knowing who's who in the zoo, depending on what publication and station they come from. Step 4, and perhaps the most critical point, do we participate in the story or not?
That's right. And there's only one question that you need to answer here. Is our situation made better or worse by appearing? Now, it does get a bit more complicated than that, because sometimes if you don't appear, then the story won't go to air because the publisher insists on both sides of the story. Other times, though, you've got to make an assessment on whether your quote is going to make the story longer and will actually amplify the situation, or by having your quote in, you will actually balance the story. So it does get more complicated than that.
So step 5, let's say you decide to participate in the story. There's 3 types of messages. One that's never good is no comment. It never looks good.
Yep, there are ways to say no comment if you decide not to comment. You can say, look, if let's say it's a mining accident. We never comment on an employee's particulars. However, safety is an absolute priority for this company. There you are. We've done no comment, but made it, put it in a form. But certainly, we need to do our best with the facts available, and in situations where it's appropriate, don't forget empathy. That's the first thing. The second thing I would say is, and this is the second component in a message, make sure you get across the company's culture and values in what you say. And the third thing that is really valuable to talk when you're talking to the journalist is say something like your personal values. Look, I'm really committed to this company because of its corporate culture and the priority it gives to safety. Now, that's never going to go to air, but it does give the journalist a bit more of a feel for the quality of you and for the quality of the company. And remember to check 2 things. Are we being honest? Tick. Are we being transparent? Tick. It may sound self-evident, but what happens when you're in a desperate hurry, in an eagerness to get a statement out, you'll say something that is not quite accurate. The trouble is a little bit of inaccuracy can later on turn out to be a big fat lie.
Step 6, don't get defensive, which can be tough when you have a journalist breathing fire on the other end of the line.
When you're under pressure, it's very easy to move onto the back foot. And listen to yourself when you're doing it. If you hear but in one of your sentences, you'll know you're probably going defensive. It's almost always you can change a sentence structure by using and instead of but. Sometimes it'll change the content of the sentence, but it certainly changes the tone of the sentence. And the next is whether or not you want to apologize. if you find that the allegation is true, then it's a very quick decision to make. But sometimes a bit of short-term loss is a long-term gain in the company's reputation. It's a very difficult decision to make on the run, but again, people who are experienced in crisis, like those examples I talked about, may well have a well-oiled machine to make that kind of a decision.
Step 8, it's the nuclear option when you decide to call in the lawyers.
Yeah. Use this with caution, because it can have a ripple effect through the publisher and certainly with the journalist, and it can backfire and have an impact on the reputation of the company. But if you know that a mistake is being made and the journalist is determined to publish, then get a media lawyer. Media law is a specialist area. The really good media lawyers who will act for you know all the media lawyers inside the publishing house. And so they will have a direct line, probably a mobile, certainly an email, and they can very quickly ring and explain to the lawyer, followed up by a letter, explaining that an error is going to air. If a company willfully and knowingly puts something to air that they know to be factually incorrect, it is, in legal terms, can be an indication of malice, which is a real red flag for lawyers.
And the final point is the follow-up, which is crucial in establishing relationships and trust.
Yeah. So what you hear in these kinds of situations is the journalist was a real bastard. The journalist wasn't a bastard. The journalist was doing the best that the journalist can possibly do, most likely, in a very tough gig, on the same kind of deadline that he or she has forced you to be in. So the journalist who's done a negative story on you today will probably be able to do a positive story or a story more balanced in expressing your corporate culture and values in a couple of weeks. So a quick phone call, you would be surprised, and Liam, you'll remember this, and I certainly do when I was a journalist, how rarely people rang to compliment you or to say something nice after a story. Certainly you'd get abusive phone calls, you get the rounds at the table, but very rarely a complimentary or a sympathetic or an engaging phone call, and it pays dividends.
Absolutely. Very rare to receive those complimentary phone calls after a story. As a journalist, Peter, great tips, 9 tips there, and plenty of experience has gone into those. 30 years as a journalist with 60 Minutes and 4 Corners, and now 20 years in PR. Thank you very much. If you want to find those 9 tips in written form, you can find those on the Wilkinson Butler website and on our LinkedIn profiles. Peter, thank you.